Now, I think it's safe to say that one of the greatest mysteries in all of Star Wars is who or what exactly are the Whills. After all, they've been there and in the mind of George Lucas from the very beginning. The script for A New Hope is even said to be taken from something called the Journal of the Whills, which is believed to be a collection of all the, what you might call, important stories or events that have ever transpired in the Star Wars galaxy. However, despite their apparent importance, Lucas had never really talked much about them until lately. Still, there had always just been this sort of assumption that they are something akin to gods of the Star Wars universe, though maybe not the type of god that controls and dictates everything, but instead the type who just observes and records events, hence there's this thing called the Journal of the Whills. But that notion of what the Whills are in the mind of Lucas recently started to get challenged thanks to a book that came out a few years back now called James Cameron's Story of Science Fiction, where Lucas was quoted as saying things like, the Whills are, in essence, the Force, but that they also feed off of it. He then goes on to say that they even treat living beings like vehicles that they use to travel around, and that his version of the sequel trilogy would have delved into all this, as well as the whole microbiotic realm. And now thanks to yet another new book, this time one called The Star Wars Archives 1999 to 2005, we're getting far more details not only about what Lucas's sequel trilogy would have looked like, but what the mysterious Whills actually are according to him. And in a video the other day I covered some of this, like how Darth Maul and Darth Talon would have been the main villains of his sequels, and other things like how Lucas said the struggle to rebuild the Jedi and Republic would have been a greater challenge than fighting and winning the war had been. He also said how Leia would become the new Supreme Chancellor and would end up being the Chosen One, while Luke would seek out the Jedi that had survived Order 66 and still remained out in the galaxy, that of the 100,000 Jedi that were around then, some 50 to 100 were still around. Which makes Yoda's line to Luke in Return of the Jedi about how, when gone am I, the last of the Jedi will you be, true from only a certain point of view, I guess, though I certainly think of all the Jedi that might still be around, Luke was probably the only one with any hope of challenging Vader and Sidious and being victorious. Anyway, though, all that is certainly a interesting discussion for another time. Getting back to the Whills here, this new book goes into a lot more details about them, some of which I'm going to guess a lot of people aren't going to like, since it sounded more scientific than mystical, which is something that even Lucas talks about and addresses in this book, which I will get to. And quickly before getting into all this, let me just note here that I do not have my hands on a copy of the book just yet, so everything I'm talking about here has come to me secondhand, and a big thank you to everyone who has been sending me information, clips from the book, and so on. That said, we first learned here that the midichlorians are the equivalent of both mitochondria in living organisms and photosynthesis in plants, that they are basically a combination of the two. Lucas said that he likes to think that there is a unified reality to life and that it exists everywhere in the universe and that it controls things, but you can also control it. That's why I split it into the personal force, or what's been referred to before as the living force, I assume, and the cosmic force. Lucas then goes on to say that the personal force is the energy field created by our cells interacting and doing things while we are alive. When we die, we lose our persona, and our energy is assimilated into the cosmic force. If we have enough midichlorians in our body, we can have a certain amount of control over our personal force and learn how to use it, like the Buddhist practice of being able to walk on hot coals. The Jedi will train you to connect to your personal force, and then to connect to the cosmic force. You don't have much power to control the cosmic force, but you can make use of it. And, well, here, how I interpret all this is kind of what we could assume after the Phantom Menace, that the more midichlorians you have in your cells, the more powerful you are with the Force, or the more control over it you have, which I know is an idea a lot of people really don't like, and I've always kind of hoped it was sort of the opposite, that the more powerful you are with the Force, the more in tune with life you are, the more you listen to and follow the will of the Force, the more midichlorians you happen to have. This could then mean that someone who uses the dark side of the Force would actually have less or would lose midichlorians as they fell further to the dark side, which could explain why many Darksiders become hideous or deformed, because they're losing their connection to the living Force or life itself, which would then be the ultimate irony since a lot of Darkside users seek eternal life, and they're actually going down the wrong path to achieve that, since we know the most loyal servants of the Force become Force ghosts and do in a sense achieve immortality, or a form of it. Anyway, here Lucas then goes on to say that the Whills are a microscopic, single-celled life form like amoeba, fungi, and bacteria. There's something like 100,000 times more Whills than there are midichlorians, and there are about 10,000 times more midichlorians than there are human cells. The only microscopic entities that can go into human cells are the midichlorians. They are born in the cells. The midichlorians provide the energy for human cells to split and create life. The Whills are single-celled animals that feed on the Force. The more of the Force there is, the better off they are. So they have a very intense symbiotic relationship with the midichlorians, and the midichlorians effectively work for the Whills. Okay, so again here, though this might all sound a little ridiculous or something like you really don't want in Star Wars, I do see what Lucas is going for here, because I've always argued that what I believe the will of the Force to be is just some sort of innate desire of the Force to be in a state of balance, where life continues on in a way that is beneficial to all, and it all acts as one big symbiotic system. And that is kind of what Lucas is saying here, that despite me arguing against this in the past, that the midichlorians do indeed seem to generate the Force, or at least the living Force, and that the Whills then feed off that energy, and in order for there to be a good constant flow of that energy, life must always continue to thrive in the Star Wars galaxy, and the best way for that to happen is for there to be balance, so that all life can indeed carry on. So basically what I'm saying here is it seems like the will of the Force is actually the will of the Whills. That when a Jedi quiets their mind and listens to it, as Qui-Gon talks about in Episode 1, they're actually hearing the Whills speak to them and telling them what essentially needs to be done or should be done for there to be balance in the galaxy. And in this book, Lucas even says that it was the Whills that directed the midichlorians to create Anakin Skywalker. And again, as I've been saying, you can certainly love or hate all this, and if you hate it, I suppose you can take solace in the fact that Lucasfilm under Disney is unlikely to ever run with any of these ideas. And personally, I'm just happy to learn Lucas's ideas behind everything, which is not me saying I either like or dislike them. I just think it's great to know what the creator of Star Wars had in mind for everything. And again, in this book, he even goes on to address how a lot of people are no doubt going to feel about these revelations, or would have felt about them if he had made his sequels. And about that he says, it is estimated that we have 100 trillion microbes in our body, and we are made up of about 90% bacteria and 10% human cells. So who is in service to whom? I know this is the kind of thing that fans just go berserk over because they say, we want it to be mysterious and magical, and you're just doing science. Well, this isn't science. This is just as mythological as anything else in Star Wars. It sounds more scientific, but it's fictional. It's saying there is a big symbiotic relationship to create life and to create the Force. But if you look at all the life forms in the universe, most of them are one-celled organisms. I think of one-celled organisms as an advanced form of life because they've been able to travel through the universe. They have their own spaceships, those meteorites that we get every once in a while. They've been living on these things for thousands of years. They've been frozen, unfrozen, and can survive almost anything. The one-celled organisms have to have a balance. You have to have good ones and bad ones, otherwise it would extinguish life. And if they go out of balance, the dark side takes over. Okay, so once again here, I get what he's saying and what he is or was going for with the big picture of Star Wars. And on its own, I don't think the idea or concept is bad by any stretch. I think it's rather interesting and far more involved and complex than I ever would have guessed. It's also incredibly creative, but I don't think it's what most people or fans want out of Star Wars, to be honest with you. I think whether this is actual science or not, most fans want more fantastic type answers to explain things, over ones that, again, maybe aren't based entirely on actual science, but kind of sound or feel like they are. And I think the best bet overall, if you want Star Wars to endure for a long time, would have been to never get into all these nitty-gritty details of how things work, which Disney didn't do with their sequel trilogy, and might just be the main reason why they completely scrapped Lucas's ideas for it and went with their own. Because, as I've said before, the mystery is oftentimes better or more intriguing than the actual answer is. That once you pull back the curtain and reveal the inner workings, people are often disappointed or just lose interest. But I think the big thing to keep in mind here is that George Lucas wanted to finish the story of Star Wars, to complete his ideas and his message for it, and I think he would have very much done so with his sequel trilogy, whereas Disney obviously has a vested interest in keeping things running and people hooked indefinitely in order to make as much money off it as possible, which again is a big reason why I think they didn't go with his trilogy. And so in closing here, and in my personal opinion, I think this is sort of a win-win scenario, learning about all these things Lucas would have done with the sequels and about the Whills in this book. Because, yeah, the ideas behind it all are fascinating, and I just wanted to know what Lucas would have done with the sequels and what his ideas were. But honestly, and maybe this sounds selfish, and I mean no disrespect to Lucas, but I do kind of prefer the idea that things are a lot more mystical or a lot less scientific feeling, if that makes sense, than what he was aiming for. And that's by no means either an endorsement of the sequels we got or me condemning the sequels Lucas would have given us. It's just that, again, I think Lucas was interested in finishing the story of Star Wars, which I can understand and respect him for wanting to do. But I really don't think it would have gone over well with a lot of fans, and that, in a sense, it would have indeed ended Star Wars, or a lot of interest in it anyway. So yeah, it's awesome to know what his plans were, and it's certainly a creative and interesting idea, and I'd love to learn even more about it, or learn more about what the actual story was behind his sequels, but I do think it would have been rejected and criticized by most. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Do you like Lucas's ideas for the Whills, the midichlorians, and all that? Or do you think we dodged a bullet by him never getting a chance to make his sequels? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.